How can we provide more habitat for fish? Fish need water, and fish need habitat.
Loss of habitat for species is one of the leading causes of their demise. Stream banks and wetlands provide valuable habitat for fish and wildlife, so restoring them is very important for their livelihood. Vegetation along the streams, riparian vegetation, and also wetland vegetation can provide cover for fish from predators that might eat them. The vegetation provides shade, which cools the water temperatures, and wetland vegetation can also provide food to fish that are living in streams and in wetlands. Wetlands and riparian areas also function to filter nutrients that come off of the mountainsides and get into the waterways. They act like a sponge, and they can absorb the nutrients and bring them into their plant tissues, and so water quality in the river and in the wetland can be improved because the vegetation actually absorbs these nutrients, so it's not available for algae to grow in the lakes.
The riparian vegetation also filters animal waste and farm runoff, key factors in algae blooms which lead to dead zones and dead fish.
The Lost River and the short-nosed suckers that live in Upper Klamath Lake make spawning migrations up the Williamson River, and after the eggs hatch, the larvae drift downstream, and historically they would inhabit the Williamson River Delta wetlands before they went out into the lake. Now, back in the 1940s and 50s, this area was diked and drained, and it was farmed. The Nature Conservancy purchased the Williamson River Delta in 1996, and the plan was to restore it. So the first thing we needed to do was come up with a plan for how we were going to do the restoration. So we basically did a study to determine what the flow through the delta would have looked like had there been no levees here. And once we did that, we determined which levees we could remove that would allow the flow to continue in how it used to historically. So beginning in about 2006, we started earth moving out here, and that year we removed over 1 million cubic yards of material from the levees inside the delta. So in 2007, we used about 200,000 pounds of explosives to blow up 4 levees, and the levees were about 2 miles in length total. And so the fall of 2007, we blew up the levees and allowed about 3,500 acres of the delta to flood. Then in 2008, we finished removing some of the levees on the south half of the property, and total we flooded about 5,500 acres.
Ranchers and farmers above Upper Klamath Lake have been working to restore stream banks, funded by the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, local landowners, and others. In addition to the restoration of the Williamson River Delta, there have been other projects to help Chwam and Kapto survive. The A Canal fish screen saves fish from being trapped in Klamath Project irrigation equipment. A new fish ladder at the Link River Dam allows suckers from below the dam to go up the ladder and spawn in Upper Klamath Lake. The removal of Chiloquin Dam allows suckers from Upper Klamath Lake to move up the Sprague River to spawn. Another challenge to increasing the survival of young Chwam and Kapto may be competition from non-native fish, such as the fathead minnow, that by far outnumbers the young suckers.
In October of 2007, Marmot Dam was removed by Portland General Electric. Some officials worried that the sediment behind the dam would linger and present an obstacle to fish. But the day after the dam crumbled, coho salmon were swimming easily upriver.
The conditions in the Klamath River today are quite different than what they have been for the thousands of years that salmon have adapted to survive in the Klamath River. And salmon and other fish, just like people, there's certain conditions that they require to be able to survive and thrive and do well, like good, clean, high-quality water, They need diverse habitats to meet the needs of their various life stages while they're living in fresh water. And there's been a lot of things that have happened on the landscape over the past 150 years that have affected these conditions that they've evolved with over the past thousands of years or adapted to. And some of these have resulted, well, some of the big ones are the constructions of the 4 dams in the main stem Klamath River, which has done many things like blocking access to some of their historic habitat, as well as affecting water quality substantially. There is a estimate, I think it was by Hume back in the late 1800s, and it had been documented that there were more spring Chinook than there were fall Chinook in the Klamath Basin, and that's far from the truth today. And I think it's largely due to the fact that the dams were constructed and blocked access to some of their prime historic spawning habitat, but now the natural populations of spring Chinook probably comprise less than 5% of the Chinook population that returns to the Klamath Basin.
Pros for dam removal would be, the main pro would be an increase in salmon population. It would restore a large amount of salmon habitat. It improves water quality conditions, provides high quality habitat conditions. Commercial fishing gets an increase in salmon or fish to fish for, brings salmon back to tribes whose livelihoods depend on them.
And the cons are a huge loss of power, tax increase to remove dam, release of sediment, possibility of fish not going to new habitat, poor water and habitat quality in some areas, loss of work for employees at dams, and money spent on search for new power sources.
We had 4 salmon experts from the Columbia River system come down, and we asked them to tell us straight up which parts of the system will take salmon, which parts won't, and whether they think that reintroduction of salmon under present conditions is a reasonable thing to attempt. We had these 4 professionals come, they toured around, they saw things they liked, they saw things they didn't like, and at the end of the day they said, well, it looks to us like it's reasonable to attempt reintroduction under present conditions to the Williamson and the Wood River systems. Those are both dominated by spring water flows that just pop up out of the ground with, with a really large amount of flow. And it's nice and cold and clear and clean, and there's good spawning.
The reason we have chose to do a graffiti project is because we all like the different styles of writing. We wanted to see how we would be able to benefit letting people know what's going on with our river and why our fish are dying. We wrote "Not for Sale" on our poster because we wanted to stress the idea that is basically what we as a Klamath tribe stand for, our river and our fish. By having dams in the river is basically selling our way of life. Selling electricity is a good thing, but also in doing that our rivers is being taken away, and who would want something they stand for taken away that natives had known since we have been here to basically go to nothing.
Parallel to the Klamath Basin Restoration Agreement, Pacific Corp, the owner of the 4 mid-basin dams, after extensive negotiations with stakeholders, agreed to remove the dams. The final decision to remove the dams depends upon further research, legislation, and funding. Removal of hydroelectric dams calls for new sources of energy. In addition to the sunshine and geothermal capacity of the Upper Basin, students have explored wind energy, using Upper Klamath Lake algae to make bioethanol, and nuclear power.